Oh, excuse me, I'm back at work and it's very, very loud right here, so I have to make this video in the quietest spot in my work trailer, which, as it happens, is the bathroom. It's pretty nice actually. Here, let me show you. I don't know how clear it is, but there's actually a freeway out there. It's Highway 50 in West Virginia, just a few hundred yards away from it, up on the ledge. It's pretty nice. Anyway, so work is cutting down on my videos. Living in an apartment, I don't have any privacy there, and I've been kind of busy. But not so busy that I haven't become extremely annoyed in comment wars with socialists, which I think most of us are aware how frustrating that can be. And the video in particular I watched was, I believe, one that the Sauce made a response to a video called A Short History of the Word Libertarian by Anarcho-Pack. Now, Anarcho-Pack, really, he's made a few comments that I haven't really been arguing with him all that much. He seems fairly civil, although makes some silly arguments like private property can only exist with the state, and that private property and markets are fine, but the means of production, to have them be private, that's coercive. That's a little silly. But I got in extensive arguments with another username, Miss Sexy Socialist, who is not sexy, at least to me, and another guy from Scotland who I don't remember. He just came in this morning. And this is just incredibly frustrating because they bring up so many things that are silly and absurd. Assumptions like everybody wants, I mean, I asked, well, what about people who don't want to voluntarily join your socialist system? And Miss Sexy Socialist just could not understand what I was talking about, because she assumes that everybody would voluntarily, explicitly decide to join such an organization. Everybody. And that only a tiny, tiny number of radical anarcho-capitalists would ever object to that. Now, I know there's only a tiny, tiny number of anarcho-capitalists, although I wouldn't be at all surprised if we were somewhere in the 1% range or getting there, which is, yeah, tiny. But most people aren't anarcho-syndicalists either, especially in the United States. So that's kind of a silly assumption to think that everyone... I don't have a problem with voluntary socialism. And I said that right off the bat. You know, if people want to form a voluntary socialist, commune, more power to them, go right ahead. My concern is for people who don't want to join such a commune. What will the commune do? Historically, I think it's reasonable to ask this, since I think there would be a tendency for them to want to expropriate anything and everything that they can, and to simply assume the moral high ground that, oh, we're the majority, we can do it. Now, she was operating on the assumption that everybody would have voluntarily agreed, in which case I don't have an argument, but I think that's a very silly assumption. Also, the assumption that anyone who is a libertarian is secretly trying to have the elite rule everything, and that anarcho-capitalism requires an elite to rule everything. It's just silly. Anyway, it was very frustrating, and one tends to want to make long videos about all the topics, and it's just not worth it. So I think it's better to just isolate a single issue and do a video on that, which I like to do now. Now, one of the later people I argued with, we got into heated discussions mostly about what amounted to the labor theory of value, and I want to make a video on that later, but not now. But I started to make headway when I started to talk about my own personal experience as a wage slave. Although technically I'm not an employee, I'm a contractor, a subcontractor. And I don't know why that is. Anecdotes are not proof. Anecdotes can never prove a point, but what they can do is they can illustrate a principle. And I think what's happened in my life, both my current job and previous ones, explodes at least one or two of the major myths that socialists cling to and accept this dogma. And the one I'm talking about is the idea that employers have plenary powers when it comes to negotiating contracts. That basically, and this part of the saying is true, that they want to sell their products at the highest price, but they want to produce them at the lowest price, including at the lowest wages. It's absolutely true that people are going to want to do that. Just like every person is going to want to get the maximum wage for the minimum amount of work. It's just there's a disutility to labor. It's perfectly natural for people to want that. But the idea that capitalists or employers or the rich are able to simply dictate terms to would-be or actual employees is silly, and it's not supported by the facts. The number one fact against it is that, and these are anarcho-syndicalists, so they're not. They say they're anarchists, although they support all kinds of statist things. But the common argument here is that if it wasn't for the government holding back the corporations, they'd all be paying us nothing. You know, since there's minimum wage and regulations here and there, you know, they can't rape us as much as they want. But if those weren't in place, if we had a real free market capitalism, then everybody would be working for a dollar a day or whatever. And we know that this doesn't quite square because most people make more than government-mandated minimums as it is. You know, if the only thing that keeping the rapacious employers from gouging wages was the government, then everybody would be making minimum wage or whatever other wage is mandated by the state. You know, I don't think minimum wage is the only one, but I'm not too familiar with the others. You know, so maybe if they say doctors have to be paid X, well then, you know, doctors would be paid X, but not more. But most people make more than minimum wage. And so there is no ability to explain this in socialist Marxist theory. Because the government's not making people give raises, making employers give raises above this. And I've asked socialists before, and you know, one of them told me once that that just shows that some employers aren't nice. This is from a guy who says, you know, employers are inherently evil, capitalism is inherently evil and exploitative and based on theft and plunder, and yet, well, some of them are nice guys and give raises. But it's not some, it's like 80 or 91%. I think it's only 9% of the people make minimum wage or below. Because there are people who make less than minimum wage under the table, or you know, they have exclusionary rules for minors and that sort of thing. So if 91% or whatever, it's the large majority pay more than that's a large majority that are, quote, nice. But I don't think that's a very good explanation either. So the short answer is that capitalists are profit seekers, which is true. We all are. We all want to get the most out of what we give. And socialists would call them greedy. Now, greedy, I don't know if it's wrong. It has a pejorative meaning that I don't think is necessary. I think there is a room in the lexicon of human interactions for people who are particularly avaristic, or you know, maybe whose entire moral philosophy or ethics has no other function other than the acquisition of material wealth, or especially money. I think we could look at that and we could call that bad if we wanted, but all we need for wages for employees to be much higher than socialists allege is for employers to be greedy. What's the cause for that? Well, let's say a corporation has hired employees and it's paying them $5 an hour, and it's able to take the products of their labor for that for each hour that they spend $5 in wages on. And let's say after all the other costs, you know, of whatever material goods and everything, that in addition to the labor and all those other costs, they're able to profit $5 extra. So, I mean, the cost of the actual labor would be the labor plus all the other costs, and then they sell it, and just after everything's all said and done, they make $5. So they're making $5 an hour. Now, socialists would say, "Oh, look, this isn't fair. They're you know, clearly the workers could be making at least $4.99 more per hour, and the evil capitalists would make, still be making a penny at least. They shouldn't be making anything, but so they should. There's a discrepancy here, and it's going to stay that way. And there's no reason that the employer is ever going to raise the wage, because that would just decrease their profits. Well, there is actually, because other greedy capitalists are going to look at this business, whatever it is, whatever they're doing, and say, look, they're hiring these people, they have all this, and they're making $5 an hour, even after wages and everything. Wow, I'm a greedy capitalist. I'm more than willing to make an investment that's guaranteed to pay back that much, so they will, and they'll start doing the same thing. Now, this has two simultaneous effects. One, it is going to increase the supply of whatever is being produced. Now, unless demand increases to the same degree, that means that supply has increased, demand hasn't, that the actual price is going to fall down. So right there, instead of $5 on top of everything, it's going to be somewhat less. How much? I don't know. But if it only comes down, say, 10 cents, that's still $4.90, which is still a profit. So that's still going to induce yet more people to enter the market. More capitalists. It's not like they're going to say, well, it was $5 and now it's $4.50, so I can't live with that. No, it's still a profit. So the evil, greedy capitalists are going to open up their own factories or stores or whatever the business is, start producing, and that will lower the price even more. Now, the other thing that happens is they're going to have a demand for labor. They're going to say, okay, we need to hire people. Now, ideally, they're going to want to hire people at the exact same rate. But how are they going to induce employees to come there? They can't force them. They're not the government. They don't have conscription. They can't go out with guns and tanks and drag people off the streets. Even if they did, after one shift, those people would be gone. So they have to induce them to come to their factories, which means they have to find some way to get employees to go there. Now you say, well, they'll just pay them all exactly the same. Everyone will just pay, and it will be, for the same wage, and none of the employers will ever raise the wage. That's wrong, because there would be a competitive advantage for anybody who could have better employees. And this is something I think an argument that socialists and all these labor crazy people would have a hard time refuting or objecting to. If you have a store and you can hire the better employees than your competitors, then you can be more efficient, you can be more productive, and even if your productivity goes up 10%, then you can give them a 5% raise. They'll be better off, you'll still be better off, and it makes sense to still do that. And so basically at that point, then the employees at the other factories can say, okay, well, why am I working here when I could go to this other more efficient factory, make more? And so the two processes of demand supply, which is going to lower the price and the absolute profit, and the increased demand for labor, and the bidding up basically causes wages to bid up, prices to come down, and they approach the middle. They don't actually meet, because then they can in temporary circumstances, they can. So you can have employees who are making more than they're making in the company. I've done that. I had a telemarketing job for like 6 months. I guarantee they didn't make any money off of me. And I wasn't trying to thwart them. I just was too honest to get people to donate over the phone. They lost money on me, but I still got my check just the same. I got my check until I quit for other reasons. So, but the tendency is for wages to approach it's actually the discounted marginal revenue product. So what that is that's how valuable the wage actually is, or the labor actually is in monetary terms to the employer. So if the employee is only worth $5 an hour to the employer, they're never going to pay them $5.25, except in the short run by some accounting error. If they haven't accounted costs accurately enough and they make a mistake, but they're not going to consciously do that. And why should they? And the socialists out there, I think most of them would not begrudge an employer for overpaying his employees and losing money, because then eventually they'll need to just go out of business and there wouldn't be a job. So there's that. Now people say that all sounds fine, but how come that doesn't happen in reality? Well, one thing that can stop this is if new employers are prohibited from existing or impeded from existing by putting barriers to entry, which, sad to say, is pretty much the case with every industry. Now, some industries, it's it's completely abominable. I mean, there's some industries that are explicitly monopolies or oligopolies, where it is not legal for there to be any competition. So, oil refining. There can be no new oil refineries in the United States. Literally, even the people who are doing it, even the companies that are doing it, can't build new factories. No one can come and compete with them. So they can pay their workers more or less whatever they want. And the only way the workers could get out of it is to switch to a different career, a different profession, or maybe another member of the oligopoly. However, if competition was allowed, other people would attempt to refine oil, and they would have to try and induce these employees to come to them. You would specifically want experienced, well, highly qualified employees, and to get them to move, you'd have to offer them something that was worth their while, which would usually be a higher wage or perhaps better benefits, or a combination of the two. But the government prevents that, and for other things they don't prevent it as bad. Maybe there's just licensure or some fines, there's taxes. If you get there gets to be a threshold where just the legal accounting of meeting all of the state's regulations is unfathomable. Like I don't even know how it's possible that people manage it. So me personally, I've had it where employers have literally been fighting over me, and my wage basically doubled. I started doing what I'm doing now about 2 years ago, and I was working for a small company, and I was making, I'm not going to say how much I was going to make, but I was making decent money. It was the best money I'd ever made. Of course, I'd never done anything other than like fast food for years, but it was very decent money. I was very satisfied with it. And I was out in Utah. I had done a couple jobs in Utah, and the two guys who owned my company, they had a feud. They got in a fight, and they went from being one company to two companies that were in competition with one another. Well, they both wanted me and the other employees, and it was kind of a very interesting day because we were getting repeated solicitations from both of them about being their employees. Basically, the oil company we were working for wanted me and this other guy to be there because we knew what was going on. We understood what was expected of us and what was required, and whoever we went with would get the contracts. And so basically both my boss and his former partner were basically trying to get us to be, and the thing is they couldn't coerce us. They couldn't say, listen, I'm your boss, you have to do what I say. My boss sent us both contracts that had non-compete clauses in them, and we looked at them and we called them back and said, we're not signing these. And we don't have to, and we could have just left and said, you know what, fuck you, we're done, if we liked the other offer better. And so we renegotiated, we wanted a couple things changed, and basically I got a 100% raise, which is not bad. I mean, I was already making good money, and this is all relative there, I'm sure, but I mean, it got a lot better. And the thing is labor is not a homogenous good. He couldn't just go, I'm just going to go hire somebody else, because there wasn't really anybody else that could do it. There's only so many people who can do what I can do. And you could say, well, that's maybe you're highly skilled, or this is a walk-on job, man. Okay, I got this job by knocking on doors and just applying. I have a college degree. It has nothing to do with my job here. I just worked at it. I became better and better at it. I'm competent, and basically they need me. I mean, here, I don't understand. People say it's not fair. You're being coerced because you need a job. Dude, do you think capitalists don't need employees? Do you think that someone who spends, say, $10 million on a factory and all this new equipment and all this stuff and all the raw materials, they've finished building the factory, and then they're just surveying this extremely expensive, gaudy building that they built, and then they just say, well, I'm fine, I can just sit here now, no big deal. No. They need employees, and it's actually usually very, very urgent. I mean, there are cases where people are rich enough that they're able to open up a factory, and it's a small enough fraction of their wealth, they can maybe sit on it a while or wait or whatever. But very, very often, they are under the gun to start making money immediately, because usually operating costs, like the wages, the maintenance, and the supplies, that usually consumes the vast majority of sales, of revenue. So you can open a restaurant and say, oh, look, we did $5,000 in sales the first day. Wow, that's $5,000 profit. Wrong. You got to pay everybody, pay for all the food that you bought from your suppliers, and the electric bill, and the heating bill, and the water bill, and the sewage bill. And you'd be very, very well off if you made $500 that day. If you made, 1/6, or what would that be, 1/8, 12.5%, that would be an amazing profit level. But then you've got to only take that tiny little bit of profit, and you're going to have to pay back all the operating costs, all the starting up costs. So if it costs half, I worked at, before I did this, I worked at Burger King for years and years and years, and the average Burger King costs anywhere between $250,000 and $500,000 to build a new one now. And a good busy restaurant will do maybe, I don't know, $10,000, $12,000 in sales a day, and maybe earn $500, $600 a day. So that means if you're doing well, this isn't exceptionally well, but it's well, you'll be able to pay off your startup costs in 1 or 2 years if you don't have any problems. Which means you have to be operating right away, which means you have to have employees, and they have to be relatively efficient, they have to be relatively hardworking, they have to be able to do the tasks, and there is competition evil at that level. Because, as I said, I worked at Burger King for like 7 years, and it was never as dramatic as having the managers fight over giving me a 100% raise as it was in this job. But what happened is eventually I was working at actually one of the more profitable Burger Kings in our area, and there was a Krispy Kreme donuts a few miles away, and 1 or 2 of the Burger King employees had gotten jobs there because they paid a little bit more. I'm talking like $1 more. They gave slightly better benefits where you would have holidays off. They would give you maybe a turkey on Thanksgiving, that sort of thing. Minor things. You got holiday pay, you got bonuses, like $100 after 6 months. Nothing major, but more than you get at Burger King. So what happened is, 1 or 2 workers started going to Krispy Kreme, and the next thing you know is all the best workers, literally, if you went to this Burger King and you outlined maybe the 10 best employees. And I was always really good, by the way. I always did drive-thru. Drive-thru is pretty much the hardest job at any fast food restaurant, or at least at Burger King's. And, I've been doing it since high school, and I'm pretty good at it. But why would we work there for, $7.10 an hour when we could work at Krispy Kreme for $8.10 an hour, plus get bonuses? There's no reason not to. And so the thing is because Krispy Kreme paid a little bit more, they had a stack of applications. When we would have meetings, and the guy would be, listen, this is what we need to have done. For this place to make money, this X, Y, and Z has to happen. Because I have a stack of applications back in the office, so replacement's not an issue. And so they had the best, you went to this Burger King, you took the very best employees, just a $1 or $2 difference, and they left. And it hurt the Burger King, because then they have to rehire people. People they rehire aren't as high quality, so they have to train them, so you have extra people on staff. It could take months. It can take months, even for a job like that, to get somebody to be able to replace a good worker. A really hard-working, industrious, intelligent person who picks it up real quick can do it in a couple of weeks, which is still hundreds or thousands of dollars. But most people who get hired there, it takes a lot longer. There are people who work at Burger King for years and cannot do everything. Or even, and people who work there forever and never be able to do that. There's certain jobs that are actually very difficult. But, so just that tiny little difference in price makes a big difference in the quality of the workforce, and that makes a difference in the profitability of the restaurant. If you have turnover costs where you're hiring people, if you're constantly hiring people and having to rehire people, that's terrible for a business. that can put the places out of business. So they can't just order, you know, okay, slaves, this is what you're going to get paid, and you're going to take it in the ass, and blah, blah. No, they can't. It doesn't work that way, especially on a free market. Now, if we have a government that says you're not allowed to have competition, there's only allowed to be one employer, well, that's different. Then they can do whatever they want. But that's not what libertarians advocate. That's certainly not what I'm advocating. To believe that, you know, employers have some godlike position on which to negotiate is to grossly mischaracterize their bargaining power. And there's always, you know, they say, well, you have to work for a boss or starve. No, that's never the option, because you can always go work for someplace else for a little bit less. It's called opportunity costs. So yes, this is my highest paying job that I can do right now. Someday I'll have millions of subscribers on YouTube, and I won't need this job, and I'll just sit and watch the checks pile up from Google sending them to me, because I get 10 million hits every time I make a video. But until that day, this is my highest paying job. But there's limits to what I'm willing to do. There's only so much bullshit I can put up with. And I have to put up with a decent amount of it at this job. It's worth the money, but it might change. You know, my priorities change too. You know, when I first got this job, I had a lot of student debt. I had a car loan. I had credit card debt. Not tons. I was never a fiend in that regard. But, you know, I really needed a paycheck. I had nothing saved, you know, and this job's worked out. All my debt's gone. It's been gone for months. I've been able to invest in all sorts of things. When I get paid, every check, it's like, what am I going to do with this? I don't even know. And that's a really nice place to be in, which also means I am not that dependent. You know, if my boss threatens me, hey, you might lose your job, I can say, fuck you. I can go back to Burger King. It will be far less money, but I don't need it anymore. And that's the thing, is that's the other reason they can't lower the wages, because that people will just leave and say, okay, if you're going to treat me this bad for this wage, I'm just going to go to my next best option. And then you can just not have an employee. And they can't just not have an employee. They have to have, you know, why do they put out signs that say hiring, looking for help? Because they need it. They need it just as bad as you need it. Anyway, this is ignoring the fact that, you know, you shouldn't have to. I'm not against people not having jobs. You can be your own entrepreneur. You can be self-sufficient to the degree that's possible, although that really does require, except in like literally 2 or 3 examples in the entire world, working with the division of labor. I mean, even if you wanted to move out into the woods, you're going to have an axe that was milled in a factory and that sort of thing. But, you know, I'm all for that. I think if the government didn't put property taxes and make everybody a tenant on its private property, basically, there'd be a lot less incentive for people to have to go out and generate monetary incomes, because they could say, oh, I'm just going to live on my farm and grow food and eat. That would be nice. I have no problem with that. That's great. Government doesn't let you do that because they don't let you pay your taxes in corn or in kind. They make you pay them in dollars, which induces you to somehow generate a financial income, which you can do on your own. There's lots of people who do. But the most, you know, the simplest way to do it is by getting a job in wage labor. So basically, it's not, your employers are not God. You know, people say that libertarians want their employers to be God. No, I feel very empowered because I know that I can walk away. I know that I'm free to do that. And they know that too. And if they want you there, if you're a good employee, then they will, you know, that doesn't mean that you get to dictate your wage either. I mean, you can't say, okay, I want $1 million a day or else. Like, I mean, someday I'll tell that to YouTube, but not for a while here. But I mean, that's as unreasonable as that is. It's equally unreasonable to say that employers can just say, oh, well, we're just going to pay you a penny a day. And the other thing is, one of the guys there kept saying it's coercion because you need to survive, so there's a gun to your head. Well, that's true. We do need to survive, but that doesn't mean that it's coercion. All right. Coercion means there's a moral agent to the extent that one believes in morality, who is forcing you to do something. And Mother Nature is not a moral agent. Your biological functions requiring food and water is not a moral agent. And if we accept that that is, it's not fair because you have to have the job, because if you don't have the job, you won't have money and you'll starve. Well, if that, and so hence the boss is coercing you because you have to have a job. Well, you don't have to have that job, for one. But by that logic, your boss is also being coerced because your boss needs an income as well. Just because you're rich doesn't mean you don't need an income. You still need to have your wealth. If you don't have an income, you'll eventually consume your wealth, and then you'll be going to starve. Even rich people will die if they don't act, if they don't do something. And so, what does that mean? They're being coerced. And also, this would apply to socialism. If we go, okay, say we lived in the Garden of Eden and that just everything's fine. We don't have to do it. We don't have to have social organization at all. We can just do whatever we want, and just manna from heaven supplies all of our needs. And then God kicks us out, and it's like, oh well, and let's just say that we're not the smartest people who ever lived on Earth, and we're like, well, let's form communism. It was nice in the Garden of Eden, but now we're going to starve to death unless we work together. So let's collectively own things and whatever. Well, we're not doing that because communism is an end in itself. We're doing that because if we don't act, we will starve. So that means we're being coerced, right? No. That argument would invalidate everything as coercion. One good thing Stefan Molyneux said once, you can't just say someone who stubs their toe has just been coerced. It's just, you can, words their meanings can change, but if you're just going to, for the sake of argument, have floating meanings where it's coercion in this society but not in any other societies, that doesn't really make any sense. So I think that's going to cover it on this. I'm going to make another one maybe tomorrow dealing more with prices, wages, and labor. And that's it.